The nightmare continues.
Ladies, gentlemen, and Harajam of all ages, Diablo 4 has been out properly for just a week and a half now, and we keep looking for new loot caves, the quickest methods of getting XP and gear like legendaries and uniques, and every couple of days something gets nerfed in a hotfix to try and stop us from using it. The game is grindy. Players are just looking for a way to find the most efficient way to do that grind. As you might expect, the thing is, there is a specific grind the developers have wanted the players to make more use of ever since release than they have, and the way it was intended to be as they were creating the game. Nightmare dungeons. These not only let you fight enemies that are above your level, which means that they can give you increased experience compared to normal dungeons, they have bonus drops as part of the dungeon itself, which gives you a legendary or unique at the end of it about 90% of the time really, only on very rare occasions being simply a rare, and on top of that there are specific affixes for nightmare dungeons like Gold Find, which increases the gold that drops in the dungeon, or even Magic Find, that increases the amount of items that will drop, and thus the potential for legendaries and uniques. The thing is, until now, nightmare dungeons have not been the most efficient way to grind for experience or for gear, and so a lot of players have been just sort of ignoring them, even though they house an extremely important way to increase player power, which is leveling up your paragon glyphs. Having higher level glyphs straight up increases some of your stats, some more important than others, but all of them extremely useful, and so for obvious reasons, they've been nerfing loot caves in an effort to have us put more of our attention on nightmare dungeons as the proper, repeatable endgame activity. Not to mention it also makes the game less repetitive, because you wind up doing loads of different dungeons depending on which sigils you get, rather than just running one dungeon over and over, not even completing it. That said, what about the best of both worlds? Today we've got a brand new loot and XP farming method to share, and it essentially mixes the methods that we were using on regular dungeons to turn normal dungeons into the loot caves, but it also takes place inside of nightmare dungeons, and it's the most effective concept of a loot cave right now for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's some variety available. Some builds excel more in certain dungeons more than others, and using this method you can technically apply it to any nightmare dungeon and focused ones that are great for your build in particular. But the big thing is the nightmare dungeon affixes and level scaling. How does it all work then? Well, quite simply, you want to find a sigil that takes place in a good dungeon, something you can complete quickly, but also with a good monster density and a good layout as well, so that you aren't just running around with killing anything for too long. Any periods of pure travel time are simply a loss in both experience and loot, so they're not good. As well, you want to avoid dungeons that have intermissions. These are the moments where you get stuck in a room between objectives, as these simply have zero drop rates and also no experience reward. So, like travel time, they are just a waste. Past that, the sigil for that good dungeon also needs to have the Magic Find affix as its positive one. This technically works for any Magic Find sigil, but obviously the better the dungeon that it's on, the more effective this gets. Ideally, as well, the sigil will have monsters in it that are only 3 to 4 levels above you. Monsters are worth 25% bonus XP when they are 3 levels above you, but also 25% bonus when they're anything higher than 3 levels. So 3 levels is the sweet spot, the breakpoint, but 4 or 5 levels above you is probably better for this specifically, because the entire idea is that we are going to be farming one nightmare sigil on repeat. How, you ask? Well, there's a way within the game to actually reset nightmare dungeons. It is not how you would reset a normal dungeon. You don't log out and log back in, because if you did that with a nightmare sigil active, it would actually just destroy it, discard it, you'd lose the sigil entirely. But there's a way to not only make nightmare dungeons reset, but to make resetting them so easy that you save time farming them repeatedly compared to the logout method of a regular dungeon reset. And you also keep elixirs active in between runs. The way to do this then is to activate the nightmare sigil, enter the dungeon that it's for, and then you can either complete part of it or just leave immediately. But do not finish the dungeon, do not finish it no matter what. Once you exit, go to any other dungeon. Iron Hold is a good one in my opinion, because the first objective is really quick to complete. You want to complete the first objective of whatever dungeon that you're in though, and then you can leave that dungeon and go back to your active nightmare dungeon. Now, anytime that you exit your nightmare dungeon, either through a portal, walking out, or using exit dungeon on the emote wheel, the nightmare dungeon will fully reset instantly. You can keep this going until your next log out. It will keep resetting every time, but when you log out, it will disappear. The sigil goes away and you can't do it again. So you need to basically just take your good dungeon with Magic Find, set it up the way I just said so that it resets super easily and repeatedly, then go in and complete either just the first objective or the first 2 objectives, but do not fully complete the dungeon or else, again, it's just gone. The advantage to this over a regular dungeon is 25% bonus XP for having monsters minimum 3 levels above you, and also the bonus loot drops from the Magic Find affix. To put it in perspective, the dungeon that I got was Maugan's Works, which is a mid-tier loot cave dungeon at this point really, mid to high tier at the absolute best, but not one of the best current loot caves by any means as a regular dungeon. I was getting 450,000 experience for a run over just the first objective, which took me 2 minutes. That averages out to about 13.5 million XP per hour. Doing this, I was also getting 1 to 2 legendaries per run as well, which averages out at about 45 legendaries per hour. Outside of Nightmare Dungeons, the one that gives the most XP averages out to 14.4 million per hour, but is really not very good for legendaries. The best legendary drop dungeon strat, though, is 48 legendaries per hour, and really not great experience. That means that even Maugan's Works, as a mid-tier dungeon, with magic find and enemies 3 levels above you on a Nightmare Sigil, is about 93% as much XP as the best XP farm non-Nightmare dungeon, but also 93% as many legendaries as the best legendary farm non-Nightmare dungeon. But that doesn't even include the fact that the reset time of logging in and out for a normal dungeon is a lot worse than the Nightmare dungeon resetting method, which is just exiting the dungeon and immediately walking back in. No loading screens, no wait times, you just get a good bit of time back from that as a result. And so all of that to say, even a mid-tier dungeon like Maugan's Works with this affix and this strategy is better than the loot caves that we were running before this. If you were instead to get a proper high-tier really good dungeon with this affix, with the enemies 3 levels above you at minimum, you could surpass the numbers that I have here by a really good amount. So check your sigils, craft some new ones, find some good magic find sigils in some way, shape, or form, and then if you use this strategy, it is simply better than any other loot cave or dungeon farm method currently in the game. Obviously, this probably won't last more than a couple of days. Once Blizzard realizes people are repeatedly resetting the same Nightmare dungeon over and over, they will probably patch that out as soon as they can. So take advantage of it as much as you physically can in the meantime if you're someone who wants to. That just about does it then. To sum it up, this method uses Nightmare dungeons. You need a sigil for a good dungeon that your build can clear quickly, one with good monster density, especially elites, and also ideally a good layout in general so you don't have empty travel time. You need that sigil to have the magic find affix so it drops more loot than average, giving you higher chances of legendaries. You also want that sigil to be of a tier that has monsters in it that are at least 3 levels above you, ideally more like 5 or 6 levels above you if you plan on farming the same one over and over. From that point, activate the sigil, enter the dungeon, leave the dungeon immediately, go to any random other dungeon, just a separate dungeon, and complete the first objective of that, then leave and go back to your Nightmare dungeon. From that point forward, anytime that you leave the Nightmare dungeon in any given way, it will fully reset, which means that you can just go right back in and restart quickly and easily. This won't last long. Get it while you can. It's simply better than any other loot cave method we currently have. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope that you get some good mileage out of this new farming method while it's around. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.